Welcome to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast, where we try to cut through the noise and help you make sense of the chaotic information space around us. I'm Griff.
And I'm Jay McKenzie.
Our guest today is Shayan Sardarizadeh. He is a journalist at BBC Verify, specializing in disinformation, conspiracy theories, verification, open source investigations, and extremism. He has covered a variety of topics we've discussed on this podcast, both in articles he's written for the BBC and his live fact-checking via Twitter. He's an absolutely invaluable resource if you want to separate fact from fiction online, and he is certainly a must-follow on Twitter, Shayan86. We're really excited to get to talk to him today. If you like what you're hearing, please give us a rating and a review on the app that you're listening on. Be sure to subscribe at didnothingwrongpod.com to get our content straight into your inbox. All of our work is free, but we're extremely grateful for paid subscriptions and donations that ensure that we can keep doing this important work. Thank you. Shayan, thank you so much for being here on Did Nothing Wrong.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
So, how did you get started researching disinformation, conspiracy theories, and extremism?
Yeah, it started for me around about 2015, 2016. So I worked in a team within BBC News where our work basically was constantly verifying online footage. So there was a terrorist attack in Paris, or some kind of bombing incident, or some natural disaster in some part of the world. Obviously, these days, the first place where you get footage, content, showing what's happening or giving you an idea of what's going on is social media.
Right.
But obviously, there's quite a lot of stuff on social media that's not genuine, is old, is manipulated, is not real. So our job was to basically look at these videos when we were in breaking news situations and try to figure out whether these videos were genuine, or images were genuine, real, something that the BBC could use in its output or not. Now, I would say naturally from that work, around about 2016, 2017, when the BBC established a small dedicated unit to covering online disinformation, I sort of made the transition from that team, from sort of just content verification online, to what basically was, in a sense, my passion. I've always been passionate about conspiracy theories and how they spread and how they affect the mind, and how, any of us at any point, regardless of background, education, what our financial situations, where we are, at what stage we are in our lives, our careers, they impact all of us pretty much in different ways and different shapes. That's always been sort of my passion. So when there was a dedicated team within BBC News looking at that stuff, I sort of naturally joined, allowing me to do, for me, in a sense, it was a dream job, something that I always wanted to do. And then obviously, initially, we were dealing with quite a lot of stories from America, as we pretty much have been up to this point. Your country is a massive source of news for us, doing that specific type of work. But then obviously COVID hit, and in addition to being a once in a generation type event for all of us, it was also a once in a generation type event in terms of the explosion of misinformation and conspiracy theories that arose directly as a result of COVID and the lockdowns that happened around the world. And then obviously with the development of the COVID vaccines, that also sort of all that stuff took a life of its own. So it kind of, I think COVID brought the significance of this type of work, this type of journalism to a lot of people who previously probably would have been a bit more skeptical. And then, as if by magic, you had your presidential election in 2020, which again, coming straight off the sort of conspiracy bonanza of COVID, we had that election and all the things that happened in America, both in the run-up to it, and obviously even more significantly after the election, in the 2 months after the election, what was happening both online and offline in America, which obviously, as we all know, led to the Capitol riots. And then, while after those two, we thought we were kind of things were cooling down a little bit, and COVID was starting to disappear, and we're getting back to normal life. Obviously, the war in Ukraine happened, which again was another massive explosion of misinformation. A war on the European continent that none of us had seen in our lifetimes. Well, but some of us, those like me who are a bit older, do remember conflicts in Europe. But for the younger generation, it must have been the first war that they had witnessed on the European continent.
Right.
And then, yeah, from then on, it's been non-stop pretty much with the Ukraine war. And also, while the COVID misinformation has kind of not completely gone away, there are people I think who will live by the sort of COVID conspiracies for the rest of their lives. But obviously, we've got the new sort of US election campaign starting soon. And yeah, we've got other topics, including, climate change, environment, that sort of stuff is also coming into the fore in terms of the type of work we do. And obviously, AI, which is, I think that the next big topic for us.
Right.
It is interesting that you're someone based in the UK and a lot of what you cover is in the United States. And I think here in the United States, we are very much focused on ourselves, and it's easy for people here to forget how much what happens here affects the outside world, the entire world, and our news, unfortunately, can dominate the world news. And so that is really an interesting perspective, and I think one that easily gets missed here in the United States.
But normal, right? I mean, obviously, America is the most powerful, most influential political, military, economic force in the world. So, whatever happens in America has an enormous impact, obviously, on the rest of the world, and particularly on the rest of the Western world. Yeah, I mean, I've never visited America, by the way. When I mention it, I've got loads of friends in America through this job because,
right,
as I say, every single day of my work is basically looking at America, reading about America, watching American news, going on American-focused online platforms and forums and all the rest of it. It's like, America is like my second home that I've never visited. But yeah, it's the country that I definitely spend most of my time watching and monitoring and writing about because of its unique makeup, and also the fact that, I mean, we can get into this. It's kind of an open question why America is so susceptible to conspiracy theories far more than many other Western nations. In and of itself, it's an interesting topic, and people have written books about it. I don't know that there's a definitive answer for it, but yeah, that is the case. And because obviously any major development in America has a huge impact on the rest of the world, it does take quite a bit of our time.
Yeah.
So speaking of stuff that happened in America that caused, worldwide outrage in a lot of ways, there was recently a gentleman by the name of Mauricio Garcia who did a mass shooting in Allen, Texas a month or so ago. And there was a lot of debate because of his heritage about whether he could possibly have been an advocate for the positions that he was an advocate for. So, like to get your take on that one. You covered that extensively. Do you feel that he was a neo-Nazi?
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no question about it that he was. Never mind the fact that Texas police confirmed that he was.
Right.
Just said it in black and white that the guy definitely had neo-Nazi sympathies. I mean, his social media was obvious. Again, that's another big part of my job. Basically, when unfortunately mass shootings happen, particularly in America, we try to find out, who this person was, why they did what they did, what their motivation was, where they radicalized online, what ideology they particularly had. I've looked at so many, similar types of accounts and individuals who were radicalized online, and then unfortunately took whatever nonsensical views they had on innocent people. And this I would say is a kind of a more recent development that we now have to actually argue over. Well, this person that did this mass shooting, and we have this social media account for this person, or social media accounts for this person, where they make their views absolutely 100% crystal clear to everybody. We now have to argue whether that is real or not. That is definitely I didn't expect us to get to that point. It's perfectly fine to say, hey, this mass shooting has happened. We can discuss whether somebody's ideology actually was the reason they did this, or was there something else at play, and all the other topics that you guys in America have been discussing for a long time. But the idea of, yeah, I mean, in this case, particularly coming from one of the most powerful and influential and richest people on the planet, Elon Musk, basically just saying, yeah, I mean, this stuff was just all made up. Bellingcat, which is obviously an investigative outlet headquartered here in the UK, they just made up this account on the Russian platform. Why? I mean, why on earth would they do that? And then saying it's some kind of a psyop, which, by the way, I hate that word. Like, it's one of those words that's become basically a code word for anyone with any political ideology or view. Whatever happens that is inconvenient and they don't like, it's a psyop. So that definitely was a bizarre one. But yeah, I did spend hours and hours looking at that man's account on a Russian social media platform called Odnoklassniki. And it was basically like a diary, how extensive it was, going back quite a long time. He not only did he post daily notes, sometimes actually handwritten on pieces of paper that he would then take a picture of with sort of Nazi insignia and everything. He had a Nazi tattoo. He also took pictures of himself with his Nazi tattoos, specifically after he got them. He got them in April, if I'm not mistaken, or March. But also he posted repeatedly of his love for the Nazis. Nazi insignia was all over the stuff that he wrote and posted on that platform. He posted a meme, particularly about, why, as a Latino, he liked white supremacy. I understand that that's a bit odd, but it's not, there are actually Nazis in Latin America. It's not, people normally assume, if somebody is a white supremacist or a neo-Nazi, they have to be a certain type. That's not the case. It's an ideology. Fascism is an ideology, and it attracts people of all different types and kinds.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, he posted his ID card, his speeding tickets, his credit card, all of it was there. There's absolutely no question that was him. And he also had a YouTube account that had like one video where he basically unmasked himself. He was wearing like the ghost face outfit from the Scream films, and he takes it off. And that was exactly the guy that we saw in the video. So there was a video of the aftermath of the shooting in Allen, Texas, and we saw the guy who'd been shot dead by police. It was the same guy. So there's no question that was him, and there's no question he was a neo-Nazi. As I say, I don't understand why we have to argue over these things, but that's the world we live in now.
Yeah, it seemed like he posted on this Russian site because he was fairly confident that the material would stay up and stay live because they have very lax moderation policies. And he wanted people to understand who he was and what he believed. And he spelled it out very clearly and very clearly identified himself. And then journalists at Bellingcat and you and others went and confirmed all this. And then, yes, you were told that's fake. It's a psyop. And it did seem from my outside perspective that you faced a lot of backlash. And I guess I wonder, was that unprecedented, the amount of pushback that you got with this story? And did you feel like you kind of had to learn on the fly of how to deal with kind of a new level of criticism there?
No, not at all. I mean, I face criticism all the time, and that's perfectly normal. I'm a journalist with a massive platform, and people criticize your work, and that's absolutely fine. In terms of the pushback, no, I mean, again, that's normal. That's to be expected, particularly from America. I mean, the stories we covered about COVID, the pushback was immense in terms of COVID conspiracies and anti-vax conspiracies around COVID, because those narratives attracted so many people. Same with the US election, same with the Ukraine war, and now same with these mass shootings. It's to be expected. I don't pay too much attention. It doesn't bother me. It is what it is. It's the internet being the internet. I don't care. The thing that you have to care about, which I do and take very seriously, is that whatever you publish, both in terms of what goes on the outlets of my employer, the BBC, and also on my own social media platforms, my own social media accounts, I take those extremely seriously. I check every word, every sentence, and as long as I can back it up with evidence that what I've published is evidence-based, that's fine with me. Because whoever's criticizing it, you can show them the evidence. If they don't want to believe the evidence, well, that's a matter for them. But as long as you can back it up with evidence, it's fine. And by the way, you're absolutely right, because it was again questioned by Elon Musk himself and some people on social media that why was this guy on a Russian platform when he didn't speak any Russian? Well, you don't need to speak Russian to be on a Russian social media platform. I mean, Russian social media platforms, like any other foreign social media platforms, have English, layouts. And this one, by the way, it wasn't an obscure platform. Odnoklassniki is one of the most popular platforms in Russia. The reason, as you say accurately, the reason he posted there was that he knew the chance of his material, knowing how basically far right and extreme his material was. He knew if he posted it on Facebook or on Twitter or on TikTok or on Instagram or on YouTube, the chances were people like you and me and other journalists or researchers who look at this stuff would spot it and report it, or other normal users, and it would be taken down. Or even those platforms' own built-in tools would spot the material and take it down. But he knew the chance of it being taken down in English on a Russian platform. And Russian platforms, normally, it's not just that one. The sort of moderation on those platforms is usually very lax. Even like the likes of VK. I mean, Telegram, you can't exactly call a Russian platform, although, it originally came from there. It's now like a proper global platform. But yeah, moderation on those platforms is not the same as the major US-based social network. So that's why he was there.
Right. So you mentioned Elon Musk jumping on the bandwagon of skepticism about this story. And this isn't the first time Elon Musk has done this when it comes to a story like this. When U.S. former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband was assaulted in his own home, Elon Musk was one of the people who was very skeptical about what ended up being the case, where this was a gentleman who got sort of self-radicalized reading this propaganda. And he was very skeptical about it. He pointed to other news articles. This is an ongoing theme with Elon Musk. So how much would you say your job has changed since Musk took over Twitter?
It's a bit, because to my mind, Twitter wasn't the worst platform in terms of sort of viral misinformation. There were others that I thought were a bit worse. Particularly TikTok was sort of overtaking all the Facebook. Because I'm quite old. For us, granddads and grandmas, Facebook was the place. Particularly Facebook groups was the place where most of these narratives start spreading. But now I would say, particularly Twitter in the last few months, it's kind of come to a life of its own. By the way, I don't care about Elon Musk's personal views. He's entitled to his personal views. Whatever he wants to believe is free to believe. But I just find it a bit bizarre for someone with that level of influence and power. He's the most followed account on Twitter. He's one of the best known figures in the entire world. It comes with a bit of responsibility, I think, in terms of, that your words and your actions carry quite a lot of weight and can impact people. So, it's perfectly fine to be, skeptical of, what is called, the official narrative or the establishment narrative. That's perfectly fine. It's quite healthy in any free democratic society. But once the wealth of evidence is out there and you've got police who've been investigating, saying, this is the case. The same with the Paul Pelosi case, for which he actually deleted his tweet and then apologized. Then, obviously, when the facts change, you change your view. It's perfectly fine to be skeptical, but once the facts are out there, the natural, normal, responsible thing is to say, yeah, those are the facts. But then, yeah, I mean, in the case of the Texas gunman, he sort of doubled and tripled down, even after the facts were presented to him. Which, that's a matter for him. He should respond to that.
Yeah, that is interesting, and it is okay to be human and admit our flaws and mistakes. And I know we make them, and I'm sure you do too. It can be hard to admit them, but yeah, we're all human here, and I think everyone listening knows there may have been a time they retweeted something that turned out to not be true. And those sort of stories that we see that we want to believe on social media are everywhere, and we all have to self-police, and that can be difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a gotcha game. Like, it's not some sort of a war or something. I've fallen for online misinformation loads of times, plenty of times, and I do this for a living. It's actually quite appealing and quite difficult sometimes to tell the truth, particularly, if you don't have the time to properly check, you're tired, you're coming back from a long day at work, you're on your train, you're on your commute back home, and you're just scrolling through your feed, and you just see something, and you don't have the time to check, and you go, yeah, that seems like it's true, and you see it's got it's been shared by 5,000 people, liked by 10,000 people, and you go like, all those people can't be wrong.
Yeah.
And you just share it, it happens, and that's the nature of social media, and that's why false information goes viral on social media. It's the power of social media in a sense. But yeah, that's not a problem at all. As long as, once you see the actual facts, you go, yeah, I mean, you hold your hands up and say, yeah, that was wrong. I was wrong. Here's the truth.
Yeah.
So also wanted to talk about a young man by the name of Jack Teixeira, who was an Air Force reservist who had been leaking beyond classified information that he was getting access to in the course of his job to his Discord server and his gamer friends. What kind of stuck out to you about that case? And do you think this kid's a product of our current internet culture that we're spreading at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. No question. Everything from, obviously, everything I'm saying is just based on the messages that he was sharing on Discord, that some of which I've read. I haven't read all of them, but I've read quite a bit of them. That's what it seems like. First and foremost, he was a gamer. Like that,
Right.
that was the thing he was most interested in. The thing he was most interested in from what I've seen and read of him, it was not politics. It was gaming.
Mm-hmm.
But then through gaming and through the sort of, he was obviously a young man, a product of the sort of online social media, permanently online age. He was visiting, platforms like, it's obvious that he was a 4chan guy. He constantly read 4chan. He mentioned 4chan memes and phrases all the time in what he was typing on Discord, which is absolutely fine. I read 4chan every day for my work, but there's a difference between reading it while being aware, what type of a platform 4chan, particularly the sort of politically incorrect and also the keyboards of 4chan are, and what type of people usually populate them. So he I think when it all comes down to it, first of all, it's bizarre how brazen it was.
Yeah.
But at the same time, given his age, and the type of online environment that he was in, it's also not surprising. What I do find interesting about that particular case is that he definitely, because of his type of work, although he was a low ranked officer, he definitely would have gone through all the necessary training and courses about what he can share online and what he can say about himself and all the rest of it. But for some reason, either he decided to ignore it because he thought he couldn't get caught on a private Discord server, which is again kind of bizarre for someone who was an online kid. He should have known that once it's online, it's not going to stay private. But then second, it's kind of he as somebody who was, I don't think we could necessarily say he was a member of the US intel community, but he he kind of was part of it in a sense as a low ranked officer, and obviously he had access to classified documents. I'm kind of surprised by just the way he was sharing the images, just sort of in his house, in the kitchen, just sort of taking an image of a document with all the background. And obviously, I do this job for a living and other people do it. Once you take a picture of your house with the background, including the tiles and the floor and the walls and even like the equipment that's in the kitchen, you're basically making it possible for somebody to go start looking around, and you do it over and over again. You do it in your bedroom, you do it in your car, you do it on your way when you're going to work, which happens to be a place that is supposed to be not somewhere where you're supposed to take images or share images of that place.
Right.
And then obviously on top of that, you also do like, you're into guns and you post online on Discord, on 4chan or whatever. And also you post videos of yourself shooting things with different guns, and also posting kind of questionable content in terms of what is said about, Jewish people and other things. You're making it easy for people to find out who you are, what you do, and the material that you're sharing is basically, shouldn't be out there. You're basically, breaking the law. So it's kind of, in that sense, it was bizarre. I do think in a sense it shows like we have to obviously take into consideration his age. He was only 21 years old after all. I do remember what I was like when I was 21. So in a sense, obviously there are questions to answer for people who are, in charge of the US intelligence community and are decision makers about, first of all, the level of intelligence that is sort of shared around, even with sort of really young, low-ranked officers. Is it appropriate that they can see all that sort of stuff? I don't know. That's a question for them. But also, I do think he was, in a sense, he hadn't had a chance to know about the consequences of one's actions in the real world.
Right.
As I say, I do remember what I was like when I was 21. I knew what was right and what was wrong, but it's only later in life that you realize, there are proper consequences for the actions you take, and you have to be careful. So for a young man at that age to have access to some of the biggest secrets of the US government, and then deciding for whatever reason, and in this case, obviously, he had some, political beliefs. And although, as I said, it definitely wasn't the most important aspect of his character. But yeah, he did have some political beliefs. He seemed like, he leaned kind of right-wing libertarian in his own personal views. To then sort of assume they can just share that stuff on a private Discord chat as a result of lockdown with people you've never met, your friends obviously online, and apparently it was a tight-knit community, that private Discord server, when, all of us were at home during COVID lockdowns, and then they became closer and they were talking all the time. But still, those are people you've never met, although you talk to them, you message them, you probably have phone conversations with them, all the rest of it. It's, in that sense, it just smacks of somebody who was too young, too inexperienced, and still not aware of the consequences of the actions you take properly. But yeah, that was again a kind of a bizarre situation. It was one of those that you could make a film out of it, the way it sort of broke and the way it became a story. And once we found all the different angles to it, so many crazy things happened for it to actually come into the public domain. But yeah, I'm guessing we will have more episodes like that, even more bizarre ones.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's going the other way for a lot of these people at this point. It's definitely an overshare environment now, it seems, for a lot of these kids.
And we saw with him as you mentioned, some kind of latent and sometimes overt anti-Semitism or bigotry or other things that we've come to expect in certain online communities like 4chan. And it's usually couched in, it's a joke, it's sarcasm. And it does make you wonder how much of the culture he kind of absorbed was intentional, or just he spent enough time online and it kind of became part of him. But that's something that I think, especially with kids, we don't entirely know how much all this access to social media and the internet affects them. But it's something to be aware of, and we, as we all, get older and our kids grow up, we're thinking about and worrying about. But one thing I did want to ask you about his case, there were quite a few right-wingers, particularly in America, as you say, a more libertarian bent, that defended Teixeira. Marjorie Taylor Greene came out and had, a solid defense lined up for him. And there were a few others. Did that surprise you at all? Or is that just what you've come to expect? There's always a defender for just about everything out there.
Yeah, it's tricky for me as a journalist because first of all, we love whistleblowers, people who sort of share secrets of governments, and we sort of we find out some things that we otherwise would never have known. Like, the material that, say, Edward Snowden shared, if he hadn't done it, you can have your own opinion about whether it was right or wrong or whatever. I'm not going to comment on that at all. But the stuff that he shared, if he hadn't, we wouldn't have known the extent to which governments like the US and the UK can actually access our private data. So in one sense, it's fascinating to me. And all the documents, obviously, that he took images of and shared, gave us quite a lot of information about the war in Ukraine, for instance, that we otherwise wouldn't have had because it was classified information. So I always welcome that sort of stuff. But at the same time, Jack Teixeira did not fit the definition and description of a whistleblower by any means at all. A whistleblower is somebody who's fully aware of what they're doing and they're sharing secrets or classified data with the public because they do think there's a point to it. They think, there's something has gone wrong and the public has to know about this. They're fully aware they're breaking the law, but they think there's a public interest, that there's this point of public interest that the public should know this thing is going on with, say, your tax money, and you may not like that this is happening. I would like you to know this is actually going on. That's a whistleblower. In the case of Jack Teixeira, he wasn't a whistleblower because he was fully aware that what he was sharing was illegal. And we know from the accounts that some of the other guys who were in the private chat with him on Discord, he was sharing this in a private Discord chat, thinking that it was not going to get into the public domain. So as opposed to, say, people like Edward Snowden or WikiLeaks or Chelsea Manning, who sort of shared this stuff with journalists or published it themselves, he was sharing it in a private Discord server. And he said repeatedly to his friends on that Discord server, no matter what you do, don't share this with anyone. This is sort of classified data. The problem was, obviously, you have a private Discord server with several, and he was, by the way, the eldest member of that group.
Right.
At 21, he was the eldest member. Some of them were actually minors. If you remember, a couple of guys spoke to the Washington Post. We didn't see their faces because they were minors. So you're trusting people, even younger than you, teenagers, who are permanently online like you, and probably think it's cool to have access to all this data. You're sort of trusting them not to share that stuff, and obviously they did. That's how it got into public domain. One of the members of the private Discord server basically shared it on a public Discord, on another public Discord server, while they were in an argument about the war in Ukraine. Two teenagers were basically having a back and forth about the war in Ukraine, and then one of them goes, "Here, have some classified data," to win the argument. And the same thing also happened on 4chan, by the way. Two people were just having a discussion on politically incorrect on poll. And then one of them also shared some of the documents there. So he was taking a massive risk, but at the same time, he wasn't willingly sharing this stuff with the public and sort of going quote unquote rogue. He didn't want this stuff to get out there. It just happened that, he took a massive risk. And obviously at some point he would have been extremely fortunate and lucky if it didn't. But yeah, he wasn't a whistleblower. So I found that aspect of it kind of bizarre. But yeah, you also have to have sympathy and compassion to some extent. He was a 21-year-old guy. Should he have been given all those secrets of the US government as a low-ranked officer? I don't know. But again, that's not a discussion for me. That's not something for me to comment on. It's way above my pay grade or the type of work that I do.
You did mention that a lot of the material Teixeira ultimately released or was released because he shared it on that private Discord server had to do with the war in Ukraine. And I know one of the defenses of him was that by leaking this or allowing this to get out, he was preventing World War III, because for a certain sect of the online subculture, when we're looking at Ukraine, there is an imminent threat of nuclear war. It will escalate to World War III. The U.S. will be forced to get involved. They think this is always, we're just half a step away from that. But I think and we know that the war itself is much more about the day-to-day, and the job that you were tasked with is looking at the claims that are made on social media, the videos, the pictures, and figuring out what's real, what isn't, what's old, recycled material. I guess my question would be, is the fact that it is an active war zone, does it make your job fact checking what's going on in Ukraine a lot harder? Was this new for you? Did you have to kind of learn a new set of skills, or was this just kind of building on what you've already done in the past?
Yeah, I mean, the Ukraine war was not the first war that was also fought online. The Syrian war, in a sense, was. And obviously, even the first stage of the Ukraine war in 2014 in sort of eastern Ukraine, that was also similar in some ways. But it was the first full-scale major conflict involving two big nations with sort of proper military capabilities that was fought not just on the ground, obviously, but also online. Because in this day and age, a war is not just a conflict involving tanks and fighter jets and infantry, right, and shelling and all the rest of it. It's also an online war, and both sides are fighting it, and they have been fighting it since the day it began. So initially, obviously, when the war started, obviously, it shocked everybody. All three of us remember how there was wall-to-wall coverage all around the world of that conflict. Obviously, it kind of slowed down a bit in terms of the wall-to-wall coverage in the West, both in America and here in the UK, after like a couple of months, after 2-3 months. But the pace of war misinformation on online platforms hasn't slowed at all. It's been kind of non-stop, pretty much daily. I'm looking at false claims going really, really viral. We're talking about manipulated videos, fake images, or false images, or false claims that are viewed by millions and millions and millions of people on platforms like TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and you name it. And interestingly, it's kind of quite interesting that the vast majority of the false claims actually do not come from Russians and Ukrainians. Even obviously there are sort of Russians, Ukrainians who are fighting. They don't have time, although, you do get quite a lot of videos from the people who are involved in the fighting. They share, what's going on the ground on online platforms. And, that's a source of material for us to find out what's actually happening in a war zone. But they don't have time, that the actual people are involved in the fighting, they don't have time to argue online. Most of the material that is being shared that is false is actually coming from people with specific agendas, either pro-Russia or pro-Ukraine, or against this or against that, or even just people who have a very sort of conspiratorial view of the world in the West. That's the source of most of the false material. I'm not saying there's nothing from, like the Russian embassies, the verified accounts of Russian embassies on Facebook and Twitter are a massive source of misinformation. Like, I mean, if I could, let's just list the claims that are fact checked from Russian embassies. Like, it's insane the material that they've posted. But that's kind of expected. I mean, they're one side of the war and they want to obviously fight the information battle. And it's like, yeah, okay, I get it. I understand it. But, some American influencer or some British influencer or some German influencer posting something that is verifiably false, and getting massive engagement, that's a completely different thing. And that's most of the misinformation that I've seen from the war in Ukraine has actually come from people who are not directly involved in it. They just see the Ukraine war. I mean, again, I think it comes off the back of COVID and the US election and the culture war in the West, and particularly in the US, because you now have to take a side on everything. Like, even if it's a war on Europe, on the European continent, that apart from the fact that obviously most of the governments around the world, particularly in the West, take the side of Ukraine, and then Russia is on another side, and there are plenty of other governments around the world who are kind of neutral because they want to have relations with both governments, and they just want the hostilities to stop. And then there are a few governments who are on the side of Russia. It doesn't have much to do with sort of the day-to-day lives of us, apart from the sort of geopolitical impact of it, and as you said, the risk that it could escalate into something much bigger. But the fact that we now have to have a sort of fixed and firm opinion on everything, and then there are people in America and in the West involved in the sort of daily culture war who have convinced themselves that this is a proxy war started by America and the West, because and it's kind of linked to the sort of global takeover and this sort of communist socialist world government that is coming every day. And it's very imminent. Some people have been saying it's imminent for decades now, which is ridiculous to even believe that. The idea that all of these governments around the world and all of these politicians are actually competent enough to put together a world government. a lot of global conspiracies are sort of ignore human incompetence, which is interesting in and of itself. But there are people who have convinced themselves that this is a proxy war that was started by the West and particularly the US government, and they're just posting about it. And they post whatever piece of misinformation that they can see on the internet in order to reinforce that narrative. Some people do it not for those ideological reasons only. Plenty of people do it for clout and engagement.
Yeah. Right.
One of the easiest things, people ask me, how do I go viral online? And I just say, just pick one topic that interests quite a lot of people, post about it regularly, and just post whatever nonsense that you see. Like, without even a care in the world about it, whether it's accurate, it's not, it makes sense, whatever. Just post regularly about a specific topic, and then you will go viral, because people want to hear and see and read what they want to read and see and hear these days. And it's also the impact of social media platforms and sort of the echo chambers that they create to make money, because that's for them how they make money. They just sort of give us stuff that we want to see and hear and read for them to make money. But this is also a side effect of it, that everybody now just wants to see what they want to see, wants to believe what they want to believe. So you can go viral and you can become an influencer online in a very short space of time, as long as you're just permanently online and just permanently posting, and you put whatever sensationalist, outrageous, outlandish nonsense they can get your hands on. And that's good for those people, because they think they have some kind of power and influence. Once you've got 50,000 followers, 60,000 followers, 120,000, 200,000, 500,000, you feel like you're a powerful individual, and you can basically control the views of the people who follow you and impact and influence their viewpoint. So once it starts feeling cool, you're just going to carry on doing it. You're not going to stop. You're not going to go like, okay, I've gained 50,000 followers in 2 months by doing this. I now want 100,000, 150,000, 200,000. You just carry on doing it and doing more and more and more. But that's the world we live in. And that's, in a sense, a sort of description of the type of content that I see in terms of the war in Ukraine. Most of it comes from people who are either ideologically on one side of the war. By the way, the level of misinformation coming from people who are on the side of Russia is far more. I'm not saying there's none from the Ukrainian side. If you go look, I did run, like, in the first 5 or 6 months of the war, I ran like a Twitter thread of every single piece of misinformation that I could see, and it's the longest thread I've ever run on Twitter. I kind of had to stop it because it was like okay, it's now becoming so confusing for people to sort of scroll up and down. It's kind of so long now. But if you go check that Twitter thread, it also includes plenty of claims from the Ukrainian side. But the level and the intensity and the consistency of the online misinformation coming from the pro-Russian side, not just from official Russian authorities and the individuals who are linked to the Russian government or part of the Russian government on their online accounts, and also Russian embassies, but also people who are ideologically, for whatever reason, either you're on the far right or on the far left, or you're a skeptic, or you're into conspiracy theories, or you think Zelensky is some kind of a neo-Nazi and the Ukrainian government is basically corrupt and is under the control of Joe Biden or Hunter Biden or whatever reason it might be. Those are the people who are sharing most of the misinformation and the vast bulk of it.
Right. They have fully bought into the culture war that we're seeing here, and it has sort of moved globally, like you said. And it's about to get worse again because, as you know, in 2024, we have another presidential election coming up here in this country, and the campaigning has already started in earnest, and we're starting to see it starting to get really, really nasty. And one of the ways it started to get bad is with the use of AI-driven misinformation and disinformation. We've already seen videos hitting of Joe Biden supposedly declaring war on Russia. We've seen all kinds of stuff like that. What concerns do you have going into that 2024 election with the AI coming up with new ways to misinform and disinform people?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and the answer is not quite straightforward. So, to be perfectly honest, my main concern still remains at this specific point in time, and the bulk of misinformation that I see and have to fact check every day is really, really bad, poor, rubbish, doctored memes, images that someone has taken 2 minutes or 5 minutes to create, and so easily and so obviously fake, that gets 20,000 retweets, 80,000 likes, and 6 million views, or something similar to that, not just Twitter specific, 2 million views on TikTok, 150,000 shares on Facebook, 50,000 likes on Instagram. That's still my number one concern because, as I say, the nature of social media is such that most people, first of all, do not have the time to check these memes and images and videos and claims, as long as it looks appealing to them and it confirms their own existing political, social, cultural, economic biases. They just share it. They like it, they share it, they retweet it, they view it, whatever form of engagement any specific platform has. So that's my main concern. Material that is created easily by you and me or somebody else on the smartphone or on the desktop in 5 minutes and then shared online, that goes mega viral because it just confirms the biases of a certain group of people. AI is also a concern, but not my number one concern. The interesting thing about the advancement in AI is it's kind of end of last year, early this year, that we've had these AI generated images that look really, really good. So it's kind of actually quite recent, and it's developing really fast. Obviously, we've known the phenomenon of deepfakes, which again are AI generated content. But deepfakes, despite the fact that there was quite a lot of interest among sort of governments and officials and persons of authority for several years about it, never really was a massive problem and never really took off in that sense, because creating a really good, believable deepfake of, say, Joe Biden or Donald Trump actually is time consuming and expensive. It's not easy. Most deepfakes are like really, really bad. The ones that they just create yourself. So it's not possible for ordinary people like you and me, to create a really, really good deepfake still. It's getting easier. We're getting there, but not yet. So if you want to create a really good, but I don't know, there's like deep fake Joe Rogan podcast, by the way, on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen it. Like there was one that went really
No.
viral of Joe Rogan, AI Joe Rogan interviewing AI Donald Trump.
Oh
And
God.
it went really viral. But again, it's kind of obvious that that's not Joe Rogan and that's not Donald Trump. Although in some bits, it's actually good. So you have the technology to produce something like that. But, in order to make it really, really believable, you have to put quite a bit of effort and time and spend a bit of money. The point, the sort of AI generated images using sort of Mid-Journey. And by the way, Photoshop has released a new version, a new update that includes like an AI generated fill. I've had a chance last couple of days to sort of use it and mess around with it. It's really good. It's really, really good. Still, I would say with AI images, there are still some telltale signs, including backgrounds. They struggle with backgrounds. They struggle with hair, human hair. They struggle with facial and skin tones. They struggle with earlobes, struggle with fingers.
Right.
But with landscapes and nature, they're really, really, in some cases, frighteningly good. So we are getting with sort of AI generated images to that place where your random average person can just sit in front of a computer and within 5 minutes generate a really, really good one, or do it on an app on their smartphone. So we're not there yet, because as I say, some of these AI images, although some of them look really good, there are still ways to tell which ones are fake. But we're going to be there at some point, whether it's going to be next year, 2 years, 3 years, I don't know down the line, but we're going to get there. At the same time, it's worth keeping in mind that as these technologies are getting really, really good in terms of enabling you to produce something that is not real, they're also getting at the same time really, really good in terms of helping with tools and technologies that enable you to tell whether something is real or not. So we now have publicly available tools online where you can run images through them and they tell you whether they are AI generated or not. They're not 100%. I've had mixed results with them, but they're going to get better as the technology gets better. They're going to get better as well. Obviously, reverse search, reverse image search, which is my favorite way of checking stuff on the internet, is getting really, really good, getting much better. We now have Google Lens. I know some people don't like Google Lens, but it's in development. It's going to get better.
Well, it's phenomenal.
Those technologies will get better and better at the same time. I constantly get asked this question, what if somebody produces a really good video of the president of the United States, whoever it may be, 2 years from now, declaring war, and it's really, really believable and hard to tell. I don't think we're going to be in that situation that, say, President Joe Biden or President Donald Trump or whoever it may be declares war on Russia and Vladimir Putin sees it and believes it and goes, okay, launch a retaliatory strike on New York or Washington, D.C. or L.A. or whatever. Because there are still ways to find out whether the president of other ways to find out whether the president of the United States has declared war on another country or not, rather than a TikTok video or a Twitter video or some viral video online. So I don't have that much concern in that regard. My concern is, as you said, with like a presidential election or some big political campaign or event or a war like the war in Ukraine, material that can be generated that is believable enough to shape public opinion in one direction or the other. Again, that's all conjecture. Whether we will get to that place, I don't know. For the time being, my concern, as I say, mostly sort of poor, cheaply generated fakes that, for some reason, go viral every single day. And by the way, I'm not one of those people who sort of spread fear and paranoia about new technology. I'm old enough to remember when smartphones came around and broadband internet came around and social media platforms came around, all the things that people said, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people would lose their jobs, that we would be living in some sort of a dystopian world and whatever. Most of those things didn't materialize. Humans are as bad as we are at some things, we're also good at figuring out how to deal with and live with new technologies. And I don't think any of us would want to go back to 20 or 30 years ago when we didn't have social media, we didn't have broadband internet, where we didn't have smartphones. All of those things have changed our lives for the better, in most cases.
Right.
So yeah, I'm not fearful. I do think, technology is a two-edged sword. Although it can be used by some bad people for nefarious purposes, advancements in technology also beneficial to us in most cases, and it will also get better in terms of enabling us to deal with those bad actors with nefarious purposes.
Yeah, I also don't think you can deny the fact that, and you see this all the time, the fake information, the misinformation that goes viral gets seen by 6 million people, and the fact check gets seen by 100 or
Right.
a few thousand. So when you talk about the impact it has on the public and public opinion, it's impossible to gauge. But the more prolific this material is, the more it can change opinions and sway minds. And we don't want to see that happen based on fake information. Everyone should be allowed to make up their own opinion and have their own beliefs, but they need to set those beliefs and come to those decisions based on as accurate information as possible.
This job and this type of work is not about getting people to believe one thing or the other thing. People are free to believe whatever they want to believe. That's part of living in a free democratic society. It's about, there is such a thing as a shared truth. There is such a thing as actual, undeniable, indisputable facts that all of us, regardless of our own political views, or our own personal views, or our own personal conditions, or whatever, usually most of us have believed in and have shared those truths and facts. And it's all about sticking to that and not having a situation where tons and tons of people suddenly start to completely change their viewpoints, their mindset based on something that is indisputably not true.
So anything new, any stories, any projects you're working on right now that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, there's always projects. At the moment, obviously, we're kind of, the sort of the Ukraine war has escalated again in an unprecedented way. Obviously, in the last couple of months, there have been so many events that we didn't predict, including like the drone attack on the Kremlin, and then just a couple of weeks ago, last week actually, Novakhovka Dam in Ukraine that was damaged and breached and caused mass flooding, and now the Ukrainian counteroffensive. We also had the infighting in Russia between the defense ministry and the Wagner group, what group of mercenaries, which is kind of interesting. So there's so much around the Ukraine war at the moment that is taking the bulk of my time. But at the same time, I'm keen to sort of properly start getting into. I mean, that's the thing with your presidential election campaigns. They go on for like what, 2 years?
Yes.
It doesn't feel like they ever end.
It's like, am I getting a break?
No.
So yeah, I mean, you guys are gonna have I think the Republican primary, at least the debates, are gonna start soon enough. And then once the debates start, obviously you're into full campaign mode.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So yeah, also sort of getting into the US campaign properly. Hopefully it won't be as traumatic as the one from 2020. Hopefully for everyone's sake.
Crossing our fingers here.
But yeah, I mean, that's also coming up. And also a couple of side issues. The problem with this type of work, again, for us in the Western world, is that we can sometimes get too focused on stories in the Western world, and particularly English speaking countries, say in America or UK or Germany, and sort of countries that are part of the wider West. But misinformation is not limited to the Western world. Like, just recently we had this story in Africa, in Kenya, of a Christian cult where nearly 100 people actually died. They were actually buried in this tiny field in Kenya, who were basically radicalized by this Christian cult leader who told them they had to kill themselves in order to meet Jesus. And that story was not reported properly in the Western media. It's like 100 people.
Right.
100 people were buried in this piece of land who were basically victims of a doomsday cult. and it didn't get proper coverage. There was another story in Mozambique last month where misinformation through word of mouth in a couple of tiny villages had led to riots about a cholera outbreak, had led to riots, and several people had been killed. Police officers had been attacked. The World Health Organization had to send inspectors there. Again, minimum coverage in Western media. So I'm trying to, and this is what I've promised myself, you have to, as important as the stuff that happens in America and the Western world is, there are quite a lot of stories around conspiracy theories, victims of conspiracy theories, and cults and misinformation that happen in other parts of the world that get underreported, unfortunately. And it's on all of us to pay attention to those people and to what's happening in their countries and their regions and cover their story. So I've promised myself to do much more of that, hopefully.
So this is something we have talked a lot about on this show, but we'd really like to get your take on it as well. We see a lot of the same sort of material you deal with on a daily basis, and while some of it is absurd, it can also be quite dark when you're looking at the potential harm that misinformation can cause towards marginalized groups and basically everybody else. And I'd like to get your take on how you practice self-care, keep doing the work day after day, not take this stuff with you.
Yeah, where do I begin? Yeah, I mean, I get asked that question regularly, as I guess most other people who do similar work. You guys yourselves probably get asked that question because, yeah, I mean, some of the material that you look at, I mean, we're all human beings, no matter how long you've been doing this work and how accustomed you might be to seeing this type of footage. Yeah, I mean, the last year and a half, for instance, during the war in Ukraine, I mean, we've had to see some traumatic videos and images. I mean, war is hell. Everyone knows that. And we have to look at stuff that other people would not want to look at because it's our jobs. I mean, we're not forced to do it, but yeah, like someone has to. For the purpose of reporting and getting the facts to audiences, someone has to. And it can take its toll. It can be quite traumatic, when you go through some instances when it's a matter of public safety, public health, even like videos of mass shootings, looking at the backgrounds of some of these people, the victims, and all the rest of it. It can be traumatic, and I've heard loads and loads and loads of stories from other friends and colleagues who do similar work and the struggles. I mean, there's no one recipe that you just recommend and go do this. And I've been doing this work for about 10 years now. I've heard all sorts of different things from all sorts of different researchers and investigators and journalists and colleagues who do the same work. For me personally, I think it's very important to first of all constantly switch off. And when I say constantly, I mean, go at your own pace, whatever works for you. Obviously, for those of us who do this as a full-time job, we have duties that we have to abide by with our employers. So you may not necessarily get it at your own pace and at your own time, but you still get annual leave, you get time off, you get weekends and all the rest of it. So make sure there are times regularly throughout the year that you switch off. And when you switch off, properly switch off. Because one of the problems of this type of work that I hear regularly, and it's true, is that because it's an online focused work, like most of the material we look at and we deal with is online. We're not on the ground necessarily, unless there's some specific protest or rally or some type of reporting that needs us to be on the ground. Most of the work is online. Right. And when you're permanently online, it gets really difficult to get to switch off.
Even if you shut your computer down, you still have your phone, right?
Yeah, you still, I'm like, I'm having dinner and I'm looking at Telegram or I'm looking at 4chan or I'm looking at TikTok. And it's unhealthy. It's not, but as I say, it's something that, and the other problem is with these sort of online misinformation, conspiracy theories, online extremism, chatter moves at such a rapid pace that if you're not keeping across for like several days, you feel like you're completely you out of loop. you have to go back and find out, what's been going on the last week or so
Right.
that I wasn't
Yep.
checking. And you're like, oh my God, how much I've missed out. But yeah, I mean, that's like, you have to accept it. You can't be across everything and anything. It's impossible. It's literally impossible. And you have to take care of your mental health. So switch off regularly. And when you switch off, do things that are completely unrelated. Like, don't look at your phone, or if you're looking at your phone, not for the purpose of work, get off social media, get off the internet, go out, wherever you live, go out in the countryside, go in a park, go talk to your friends, have a cup of tea or coffee, have some drinks with your friends, watch a film, watch some, series on Netflix, binge on series on Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever, or any of these streaming platforms. Read books that are unrelated to your work. Obviously, that's another problem. You go read a book and you read a book about conspiracy theories or extremism. No, read a book, read a novel, read something that is completely unrelated. Or just do things and tasks, go do some dancing courses, do language courses, whatever it may be, that just gets your mind off what you've been doing for the last month or 2 months or whatever. That often helps me. Also, having good friends in your life is really helpful. Like, I don't have too many friends for somebody who's my age, but I have really, really good friends. Like, the friends that I've picked for myself are like people I can trust with everything and anything. When I'm just struggling, I just ring one of my good friends and I go, let's just have a chat, or let's just go to my local pub. I mean, in American context, bars probably, and just have a couple of drinks. I just want to, it's been a rough week. I've just looked at some really terrible videos of children or victims of mass shootings or war footage or whatever. I'm not well. And also the other thing that I find quite helpful is try and make friends and contact other people who do the same work. That's another thing. Like, I probably, I don't want to exaggerate, but I think I know pretty much, I can't possibly know everyone. I think I know the vast majority of people in the Western world who do this work. And the reason for that is I reach out to them, be it in sort of Germany or Spain or America or Canada or Mexico or Japan or South Korea or whatever, as long as they speak English and I can understand them, we can understand each other. I reach out to them and I talk to them. I'm actually part of like actual communities of people on, say, messaging platforms or on online platforms who do the same type of work. And when we struggle, because nobody else understands exactly what you're seeing and what you're going through, other than other colleagues who do the exact same work. Right. Because sometimes it's actually not easy to explain the material that you look at to people, who do not want to hear about it, do not want to know about it, understandably so. So it's really good to make contact with other people who do the same type of work. You will find that the experiences that you have, the sort of bad days, the sort of mental issues that you may be going through from time to time are actually quite shared by pretty much everybody else who does the same job. And they as long as you can talk to each other honestly and without feeling, is this unnormal? Am I not tough enough? No. It's not about being tough or whatever. It's actually harrowing footage and material that you're looking at every day. And the human mind is not designed to consume that type of content every single day after day, week after week, month after month. And we do for this type of work. So do those things and hopefully you'll be okay. And by the way, this is now that I've got the opportunity. People like me are actually quite fortunate because I work with a major employer, and through my employer, I get quite a lot of support, including, consultations, regular sessions with sort of mental health experts to speak about exactly these types of things. I'm more concerned about friends and colleagues who do this work on top of their own full-time or part-time work that is not related. They just do it in their own time as researchers, as freelancers, and they do not have the sort of the support of a big employer with quite a lot of financial resources to help them, to look after them. For those types of people, again, it's really, really important that you have a good circle of friends around you. First of all, thank you for what you do. And I know quite a lot of them, by the way. I contact them, they contact me. You're incredible. But have a close circle of friends around you, and please, please, please contact other people who do similar work. You'll find it helpful. And by the way, last thing, I have to say this as well. If you're going through a phase that you're struggling, you need to stop. This is something that, again, I've heard from colleagues, other journalists, other researchers, other open source investigators. Once you get bogged down into a specific type of project, specific kind of work, you've spent days, weeks, months investigating this story, looking at this video, looking at other footage linked to this, tons and tons of footage linked to a specific story that you think you're going to break a big story that is of interest to millions and millions of people. And you just carry on, you press on, you're not doing well. Your body, your mind is telling you it's time to stop, but you just carry on because you think the work you're doing is important and valuable and other people should see it. I've actually seen people break down, and it's not nice. When your mind tells you that it's time to stop, please, 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 you're not superhuman. You're not out to save the entire world. Just stop. Just stop. Take time off. Do things completely unrelated, whatever time it may take, and then get back to it once you're okay again. Because if you don't, you're gonna have a breakdown, and it's usually not cool. I've had it. Other people who do this work have had it. Yeah, when you're having the signals that you have to stop, please stop. And if you don't have to watch, these videos, this horrific footage, please don't.
That's a really good piece of advice there. Definitely listen to yourself, listen to what your sense of self is telling you about how much more you can handle of this kind of thing. So, thank you for saying that. That's a very valuable thing to hear. Definitely.
Yeah, it really is. From somebody who has been in this space and this information war, whatever you want to call it, for quite a long time. And I'm sure has seen as much or more than basically anyone. So please listen to this man and stay informed and take care of yourself.
Definitely.
Well, one thing I did want to say and that I love about your work is that you are very fair and you are absolutely willing to call out misinformation, disinformation, whether it be right, left, center, what have you. You are out there on the front line correcting people when they take missteps. So again, it looks like you are expanding that fair coverage and bringing pretty much as you can to the table and covering as many perspectives as you can. So we think that's invaluable, and we very much appreciate it. And we know it can be hard because you are a person with your own beliefs and your own values. And I know for us, it can be hard to correct or fact check something that we want to believe in or that we wish was true, but it isn't. But truth matters. And I feel like you're doing a lot to advance the truth and help us get to a better place and where we need to be as a society. So
you're very kind, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Misinformation is not right wing or left wing or libertarian or socialist or communist or up and down or sideways. It comes from all directions. I've seen it from every political ideology, every background, and it has to be called out. It may come from me. I make mistakes. I'm human. And, if I make mistakes, I have to be fact-checked and called out. As long as all of us make it a thing to hopefully care about the truth and seek for what's actually true and what's not, we would all be in a better place. But yeah, it's not a partisan issue at all and shouldn't be, because it affects all of us, regardless of background and ideology and beliefs and how we vote and what we think.
Absolutely.
Indeed. Well, Shayan, thank you so much for coming on with us. This is a lot of fun, learned a lot, and we're really, really thank you for your time. We appreciate you taking the time to do this. Anything else you'd like to shout out while you're here?
No, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and yeah, really enjoyed it.
Indeed.
Yeah, it was great.
We'll do it again.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great day.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast. If you want to hear more, you can go to didnothingwrongpod.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at James, the word 4, and the letter M, all one word, and Grizza BJJ, Grza BJJ, as well as DNW Pod. Thanks again for tuning in, and remember, everyone mentioned did nothing wrong.